Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about the rock cycle. And before we get into talking about the rock cycle and the types of rocks that make up the rock cycle, it's important to understand what rocks are made of. Rocks are made of minerals. So just like you and I are made up of cells, which all together make up our whole entire body, rocks are made up of minerals, and all those minerals together make up a rock. All right, so there's three different types of rocks. So any rock that you find on Earth will fit into one of these three categories. And the first category is igneous rocks. And igneous rocks are made up of magma, or made from magma or lava. And magma and lava, those are molten forms of rock. So that's melted rock or rock in its liquid form. And so what happens is that magma or that lava cools down and then it hardens to become a solid, and that is an igneous rock. Now you might be wondering what the difference is between magma and lava. So magma is molten rock that is still inside the earth. So if you were to look down inside a volcano, all of the molten rock that would be inside of there, that would be magma because it's still inside the earth. And lava is all of that molten rock that is outside the earth or on the earth's surface. So when you see a volcano that's erupting and all of that lava is flowing out of it down the sides of the volcano, that would be lava because it's on the outside of the earth. And when it cools and hardens, both of those form an igneous rock. All right. The second type of rock is sedimentary rocks. And sedimentary rocks come from the accumulation of various types of sediments compacted together. So what that means is that as little pieces of sediment over time come together and then are pushed down by gravity and the weight of the layers of earth above them, they come together and all the liquid smushes out of them, and then they form sedimentary rocks. So typically sedimentary rocks are going to have layers in them because everything builds up on them over time, and they form those sedimentary types of rocks. The third type of rock is metamorphic rocks. And metamorphic rocks are rocks that are already formed inside the earth, and they are changed by high amounts of heat and pressure. So what happens is heat and pressure causes existing rocks to change their composition. And we know that inside the earth there are very, very high amounts of heat and pressure. And in some cases, when tectonic plates move, and we'll talk more about what those are, but when the earth's plates move, that causes high amounts of heat or pressure changes, and large areas of rock inside the earth can change what they are. All right. So just to highlight, three types of rocks are igneous, sedimentary, and metamorphic. All right, guys, so I'm going to skip this slide, but I'll put some questions in here so this way that you can answer just to verify or check that you understand what each of the three types of rocks are. Okay, so the next thing that you have to understand, or that we need to talk about, there are intermediate states. And intermediate states are those in between, where you don't have an actual solid rock. And I kind of already went into talking about this, but the intermediate state for igneous rocks is either lava or magma. And so in this picture here, you can see that the lava is being expelled from the earth. All right, so it's coming out of the volcano and it's being expelled. And then here, okay, is the magma, which is still beneath the earth or inside of it. All right, the second intermediate state has to do with sedimentary rocks, and that's sediment. So sediment is broken rock fragments, and these broken fragments come from the process of weathering. And so weathering is a natural process that causes the breakdown or breaking up of rocks into smaller pieces. And there's a lot of different things that can cause weathering. There's all different types of weathering. One of the ones that's most familiar to you is during the wintertime when water freezes on the roads and then it expands and it causes asphalt and rocks to crack and break apart. All right, so sediment, like I said, is broken forms of rocks. And these are little pieces of sediment that are in here that then eventually over time are going to be compacted and cemented together to form sedimentary rock. And then the reason I have this picture here, this is the Gulf of Mexico, and that you can see all of the sediment that is carried from the Mississippi River that's washed into the Gulf of Mexico down here, or the Mississippi Delta. Okay, so there are three processes that form each of the types of rocks. So melting and cooling is the first process, and melting and cooling is the process that forms metamorphic rocks. So what happens is you have rock that melts and then it cools down and it hardens. And that's how igneous rocks are formed. So some types of igneous rocks are formed from lava, the melting of rock, and then the cooling of that lava above ground. And other types of igneous rocks are formed from the melting and cooling of magma inside of the earth. So an example of an igneous rock that forms from magma in that melting and cooling process is granite. So if any of you guys have granite in your house, that's an igneous rock that formed from melting and cooling. So this video here is showing you lava that's being expelled from the earth, and then when it cools down, it's actually going to form this. It's going to form this type of igneous rock outside of the earth. And not to go into too much detail here, but the igneous rock that's formed from the lava here, that's formed outside of the earth, that's called extrusive igneous rocks. So extrusive is igneous rocks that are formed outside of the earth or formed from lava. Now, if rock were formed, pause this, if rock were formed, or an igneous rock were formed from magma inside the earth, then that type of igneous rock is called an intrusive igneous rock. Okay, so the last, or the second type of process, not the last, the second, is a heat and pressure. And so heat and pressure happens inside the earth, and that increased temperature and increased pressure then causes rocks to morph into a whole new rock. Right? So here what you can see is these are showing you tectonic plates that make up the Earth's crust. These are plates here, and as they move, they smush together, and there's all this heat being released and all this pressure, and it's causing this rock to change. So let's look here at this picture, just to talk about it for a minute. Right here you have shale, which is a type of sedimentary rock that forms on the bottom of the ocean. And we've talked about shale before, right? We talked about that natural gas comes from or is stored or held inside of the Marcellus shale layer. So shale is a sedimentary type of rock. However, when that shale gets pushed deeper and deeper inside the earth, the temperature goes up. And as it gets pushed deeper inside the earth, the amount of pressure is increased. And so what happens is over time, when you have all that heat and all that pressure, that shale is then changed into a metamorphic rock, which is pretty cool. So that first type is slate. Then if you have even more heat and even more pressure applied to that slate, you get schist. And then you have even more heat and even more pressure, and that schist becomes gneiss. Okay, so to sum it all up, heat and pressure is the process that forms metamorphic rocks. The third process, and last, is WEDCC. Right? So this here, all of this is abbreviated and we say WEDCC. So what that means is weathering, eroding, depositing, compaction, and cementation is the process known as WEDCC, which makes up sedimentary rocks. So weathering is the breaking apart of rocks into sediment fragments. Okay? Eroding is when they are transported from one location to another. So erosion can happen, they can be transported by wind and water and gravity, right? But it's the movement of those pieces of sediment. Then what happens is they deposit somewhere. So eventually they're gonna settle, all those little pieces of sediment. And over time, they will start to compact, meaning that the weight of all the rocks and all the layers of the earth above them is going to start pushing them together. Okay, pushing the sediments together and then squeezing out all of the water. The last process is cementation, and that means the minerals are dissolved in water, are transported and left behind to cement sediments together. So this part here, this is just where they are kind of all solidified together and you have your sedimentary rock. Right. So one of the things that's really cool to look at here is you can actually, these are sedimentary rocks right here, and you can even see the different layers, okay, as they were compacted and then cemented together. Okay, so I'm going to turn the sound off of this video because the music's kind of loud, but what I really want you guys to see here, what I want you to focus on is the fact that this water here that is flowing is actually weathering or breaking apart the rocks, and then it's also carrying the sediment away. So that's the erosion, right? That sediment is then being carried away and it's eventually depositing somewhere. Now, eventually what's going to happen when it deposits somewhere is over time, layers are going to build up on it. It's going to be compacted. Any water is going to be then smushed out of it, right, or compacted and squeezed out. And then finally, it'll be cemented together. Right? There's all different places in the United States that you can visit, and you can see all these different types of formations from sedimentary rocks. So if you go to like the Painted Desert, that is sedimentary rock formations there. Okay, so I'm going to stop here, but before I do, I just want to sum everything up and give you guys a quick overview. So the rock cycle explains how rocks form, and there's no specific order for the rock cycle because each rock can become any of the three types of rocks. So the three types of rocks are igneous, metamorphic, and sedimentary. Igneous rocks form from melting and cooling of either magma or lava. Sedimentary rocks form from the WEDCC process. And lastly, metamorphic rocks form from heat and pressure. So if you have an igneous rock that gets pushed down into the earth and undergoes all this heat and pressure, that can morph or change into a metamorphic rock. And if you then have an igneous rock that breaks apart and undergoes that WEDCC process, it can actually become a sedimentary rock. And so that's kind of the most important thing that I want you to take away from this whole entire video is that the rock cycle doesn't have a specific order due to the fact that any type of rock can become another type, okay, as long as it undergoes that certain process. All right, so that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching.